Monsieur Starling.
Oh, Detective, I was...
Please, I eagerly await to hear what reason you give for
A butler's job is never...
I am no fool, monsieur. You have spun enough stories this weekend.
Honestly, Detective, you don't trust anyone.
And with good reason.
I've been thinking about my time with the...
I often think on fond memories, but it does not take...
There are many memories held within these walls. I didn't realize the noise I was making.
Obviously. Were you preoccupied?
Of course not.
No, monsieur. You attempted to dupe me again into believing one of your...
Please, Detective. I know you know how it ended up in my possession. I was just trying to get some extra money together to...
Theft of a medal would be the very least...
Deceive? I'm sorry that I...
Would you care to explain the fake telephone call? It was purely for my...
Why would I fake a telephone?
The same reason that Mademoiselle Rihanna dressed in the Major's jacket in the snow. To allow not only the guests...
I didn't kill him.
I know, monsieur. But I also know that you helped the one that did to cover...
It wasn't like that. We were just trying to help. She had... You never let on. How long...
Monsieur, I am Detective Hercule Poirot. I only...
You will be taking her up.
She will stand trial for what...
But you don't know the full story. She is just a servant in...
If Mademoiselle was only protecting herself, as you both have claimed...
The Major's military storage.
The one that stored his medals.
Amongst other things, yes.
And those other things...
I had to protect her. If you found it when searching the study, you would have...
Whatever it is you have hidden, it will not remain that... I need a moment. Ah. Order and method. I must take a different approach. Magnifique. Another success. Aha. Ah. Oh. What a revelation! there something I have... This will not get me any... I cannot see the logic in it. Things are beginning to be... I should not be surprised by my own skills of deduction.
There is no use He always had his regiment lighter that he...
And yet, it was not his regiment.
My father's. It must have fallen out of my pocket.
Monsieur, you have stashed evidence, manipulated a crime scene, obscure...
If it is my path to end up behind bars for what I have done, so be it. I have heard how you fought for that young maid before. Fleurette, is it? You found it.
Even the secret area that has been created here is not concealed.
I couldn't just leave it at the scene for you to find.
The Major was killed by his own knife. The knife that protected his life during...
It was in his holster when he attacked her. He had hold of her arm. What else was she... She didn't plan any of it, Detective. She was...
That is what Mademoiselle told you?
She did, and I believe her. You think you knew the Major, but you had no idea.
That may be true, but that does not...
Put yourself in her shoes for a minute. If a man like that had attacked me...
I need a moment. The pieces of the puzzle are final. Some would say a lucky guess.
There is no use lying. When you asked me yesterday about seeing someone out there, I thought the game was up.
That does not explain what you were doing.
When Lizzie took me to the study, the knife was still in the Major's chest, and I knew I had to get rid of it. I dropped it out of the window, knowing no one...
So you collected it under the cover of darkness and stowed it away in...
After your questioning in the pantry, I knew you were onto something.
And where did you plan on moving it to?
Honestly... There is no use. Why what? Why I would risk everything to help Lizzie?
Exactement.
Because she is family. If you were in that position...
I can assure you, monsieur.
Then perhaps that says something about you, detective. I would do...
Even if it means crossing the boundary.
Without question. Aye, detective. But please, you have to help Lizzie. It was all an act.
If she is put behind bars...
Detective, you can't be so cruel.
It is not cruelty, monsieur. Come, my little Grace. I must act on thought and... Is there something... Order and method. That... Another success. Things are beginning to become clear. I must take a different approach if I... I cannot see the logic in... This will not get me any... Some would say a lucky guess. I would... I should not be surprised by my own skills of deduction. What a revelation! The pieces of the puzzle are fine.
Detective Poirot, I'm glad you're...
Bonjour, mademoiselle. It has certainly not been a night of peaceful...
Please, Detective, I'm not sure I can take any more surprises.
I'm afraid this may be the most upset...
You have found Felix's killer, haven't...
I have. And the guilty...
Detective, please.
It was Mademoiselle Elizabeth that was
You must be mistaken. Elizabeth would not...
I assure you I am not. It is something I spent much of last night. When you spoke of the telephone lines being out of order, it made me question the conversation I thought I had heard Monsieur Sterling make with the maid.
But it hasn't been working all weekend.
Exactement, mademoiselle. That is when I knew...
She was meant to be resting in the staff quarters. She has not been well.
I am afraid that was yet another lie, orchestrated to keep...
Why would you think that, Detective?
I only managed a few words with her before we were quite...
I must admit, he has a habit of speaking of...
It was much more than merely disturbing our conversation. It was done with...
So, Elizabeth killed Felix, and then...
In its simplest form, we...
You have spoken with Elizabeth already?
Not Elizabeth, but Monsieur Sterling.
I wasn't. What were you doing?
It was Monsieur Sterling that I found in there. I was taken by some...
What on earth was he doing?
He claimed he was merely reminiscing of his...
You don't believe him.
It did not take long for me to uncover the truth of why he was there.
Hidden area?
A room that held all of the major...
I had no idea. Did you
I did. Were you aware he was
Dishonorably? What does that... Yes, Gideon told me about the conversation you had.
Zachariah was adamant of the Major's cruelty during the war, but the extent was not known until now.
Surely not. He would not do such a thing.
I am afraid not.
Oh, Detective.
It is the reason he was discharged, denied his military pension, and...
He had been such an important part of my life for so long. In a sense, you said it was she.
It was her hand that held the knife, but he was...
In all of the years I have known her, she has barely even raised her voice.
The whole truth cannot be known until Mademoiselle Elizabeth...
Will you allow me to be present?
I think that is an excellent idea. I hope you're present.
Please, Detective. I know she has done a terrible thing, but I beg...
I will offer Mademoiselle Elizabeth the fair trial that she deserves.
Thank you, Detective Poirot.
Would you bring Mademoiselle Elizabeth to the study, where we will not be disturbed?
Of course. I'll find her immediately.
Mademoiselle Elizabeth, merci.
Miss Angeline said you requested to see me urgently.
We have some serious matters to discuss, and I would like to...
Oh, yes, Detective. Still not quite myself.
I was surprised when Monsieur Sterling hurried you to assist Madame Vanden.
I should not have avoided my duties for so long. The house does not stop because I'm feeling a little under the weather.
That is true, but you cannot be expected to complete all your tasks.
Honestly, Detective, it was best for me to not sit and wallow anymore. Have you been able to uncover who
The blackmailer's identity has been established.
Wonderful news, Detective. You can put it all behind you now. You must be thrilled.
I would not say thrilled, knowing that such a close friend has betrayed her.
Mademoiselle is correct. What I have learned over this weekend is that people are not always as they appear.
And, what if...
Well, mademoiselle, that is...
I'm not quite sure what you want me to say, Detective.
Your honest opinion is all I ask, and, s'il te plaît, do not hold back.
We only spoke when there was something in the house to be done. We did not speak of interests or pastimes.
You knew of his work with Monsieur de Silva?
I only know what is required of me to know, and that is...
But you were aware of his work as security at Monsieur de...
I was.
The factory your beloved Luke worked at.
Yes, Detective. Yes, that is where he spent his last moments. Standing short.
The resulting riots were a terrible tragedy. One that I hope we will not have to see or experience again. Something...
Nobody deserved to die that day. Not... Detective, what kind of question is that?
It is a straightforward. Mademoiselle, if there is something you wish to tell me...
I'm sorry, Detective, I just don't know how to answer it.
Let us consider what we know of the Major. He fronted the militia that attacked the workers at the... You finally had someone to blame for Luke's death. Someone conveniently located...
No, Detective.
Tell me what happened with the Major on the evening of his...
I was only in here trying to prove what I heard Mr. Beckers say. I was going to report him, I swear.
I want to. I am still trying to understand it all myself.
I was delivering Miss Angeline's dress to her room when I heard Mr. Beckers arguing with the Major in his study. They were ever so loud. Mr. Beckers was talking about the factory strikes and how it was the Major's fault. He told him that if he didn't own up to his...
I cannot imagine the Major would have taken kindly to Monsieur...
He didn't. He called him some rather uncouth names before Mr. Beckers left and went downstairs. After the altercation between the Major and Master Gideon, you went to speak with him outside, and I thought I could look around his study without anyone knowing.
And did you find the proof you are looking...
I found a payment from Mr. De Silva, but there was nothing incriminating about that.
And then you saw the blackmail.
I recognised the writing on the envelope. I couldn't believe it. How could he do...
Common sense would determine the Major was another victim of the blackmailer.
If I'd have used common sense, I wouldn't have been snooping around alone in his study. I heard the footsteps in the hall, and before I could move, the Major was standing in front of me, demanding to know why I was going through his belongings without permission. I tried to come up with an excuse, but nothing came out, and when he saw the letter in my hand, I tried to move around him towards the door, but he hurled something towards me, and it crashed against...
That would explain the damage to...
I froze. I have never been so scared in all my life. I thought he...
And you thought you would beat him to it?
Oh, Detective, you make it sound as though I had it all planned. He lunged forward and grabbed me by the arm. I tried to push him away, but he was too strong. If only you had seen the look in his eyes, I dared not even scream. I saw the sheath on his belt. I didn't know what else...
So you took your opportunity to put an end...
I just wanted to get him off me. I didn't want to hurt him. I reached for it and I jabbed it at him. His grip...
You did not even look to see what state you had...
She had just been attacked, Detective.
Oui, please.
I ran down to the pantry looking for Rahana. I explained to her what had happened, and she went to find Archie. She said... We went back to the study, and he was... Archie said that no one would believe me. That if someone like me killed someone like him, I would be sent straight to the gallows. He left the letter so you would find it. He said...
So I am to believe that it was Monsieur Sterling and Mademoiselle Rihanna that cleaned the scene and orchestrated a plan that included a fake telephone call and dressing as the
I swear I had no idea that is what they had done. Archie just told me to stay out of sight.
Then Monsieur Sterling and Mademoiselle Rihanna will be charged for obstruction of justice.
Please, Detective, they were only trying to help.
If they wished to help you, they should have brought all of this to my attention immediately.
Surely you haven't forgotten what happened with Florette. She was only accused of stealing a bracelet.
It is a day I have not forgotten, mademoiselle.
Without your help, I don't stand a chance. Please, Detective Poirot.
Oh, Elizabeth, why didn't you...
I didn't think you would believe me. I felt so guilty. And when it was announced yesterday that he was a victim of the blackmailer, I wanted to tell you everything. I'm sorry.
Come, my little Grace. I must act on thought and... Come, my little Grace. Magnifique.
Yes, Detective. I don't know where it is.
If you have been honest with me until now...
I'm sorry, I really don't know. Archie dropped it out of the study window and he said he would deal with it. I couldn't bear to... Please, I was only protecting myself. I didn't want...
Oui, mademoiselle. Mademoiselle tells quite the
I cannot imagine the Major acting in such a way. But Elizabeth...
After learning what I have about the Major's character this weekend, I would not question... I know that you share a close bond with Mademoiselle Elizabeth. But you cannot allow...
She has committed a terrible crime, but she will live with that for the rest of her...
If what she says of the Major's attack is true, she acted in self-defense. And I will do everything I can to make sure her story is heard. Mademoiselle, it is time I addressed...
Are you sure? What will you say? What...
I can assure you, they...
Elizabeth was right, though. She's just a
Mademoiselle, when Detective Poirot speaks, they will... Would you ask the guests to convene in the library?
Of course. And what...
I have told Monsieur Starling to remain in the staff quarters with the others. When... You have been of great help to me throughout my investigation.
You only need to ask.
While I am speaking with the guests in the library, would you watch over Mademoiselle...
You don't think she will try and escape, do you?
In her position, I do not know what she might try. But I trust with you there.
Detective, you have spent more time making us sit and wait for you than anything else.
Madame Van den Bosch, if you think I have spent my time focused on anything besides uncovering the Major's killer, you are sorely mistaken.
I'm sure you will be eager to share your findings with us then.
All in good time, Madame. Firstly, to understand the truth of what has occurred this weekend, one must know the timeline of events that not only preceded the Major's death, but succeeded.
We are all well aware of what happened before, Detective. You can save your breath.
You are only aware of what the guilty parties wanted you to believe. But now I shall apprise you to the true events. The reason for us all being here, you know. The altercation between Monsieur Demire and the Major, you know. The body of Monsieur Hagen was found while we were all sat enjoying a most delicious meal. That you also know. But what was kept from us all was that his body lay on the study floor for far longer than was thought.
It was that servant. She found him.
S'il te plaît, monsieur. It was indeed young Inga that found the Major's body lying lifeless in the study.
So it was her.
Monsieur, I will not allow for any further interruptions. I return to the Major's body. If we are to believe the scene that we were presented with, the Major must have been killed during the first course of our meal, a meal that none of you left, even for a moment. Speaking in the evening, you all confirmed one another's alibis, and although there was doubt in the validity of some, I confirmed that they were indeed all true. What I could not understand was how a man came to be found dead, and every guest accounted for at the time of death. That is until I questioned the latter. Monsieur Beckers, I shall now allow you to speak. You saw the Major smoking a cigar in the snow. Is that true?
It is.
False. You saw what you were meant to see. Someone in the Major's coat standing outside, giving the illusion that the Major was still very much alive. Monsieur da Silva, on the afternoon of the Major's death, do you recall hearing a telephone ring?
Now that you mention it, I have not heard a single ring all weekend.
Correct. The telephone lines have been down for the duration of our stay, meaning the telephone call that was received and promptly directed to the Major's study was yet another act of trickery and deceit. But it did not end there. When I entered the study for the first time, it was obvious someone had already been there and falsified the scene to stage a burglary and clear away important evidence, including the murder weapon. What followed was an investigation that had already been hindered. But even those lengths were not enough to derail me for long.
I think we have all had enough of your self-praise, Detective. Perhaps you would like to tell us who killed him now?
Madame, as I'm sure you would expect, it is not as simple as that. What many of you do not know is the discussion that was had between the Major and Monsieur Beckers earlier that day.
What has that got to do with anything? I told you I didn't kill him.
That I know to be true. What you do not know is that it was not only his ears that heard your spoken words.
I hope you are not implying I had something to do with it.
No, madame, there was another. Mademoiselle Elisabeth. You are all aware that the Major was hired by Monsieur da Silva to front the security during the workers' strikes. What very few of you know is that it was the Major's order that instigated the vicious attacks on those unarmed men and resulted in numerous deaths, including Mademoiselle Elisabeth's fiancé, Luc. Monsieur Beckers confronted the Major, declaring that he was to hand himself in. That is what Mademoiselle Elisabeth overheard. Now, knowing the truth, she waited until the Major was away from his study. After he stepped outside following the confrontation with Monsieur Demir's fist, it looked to be the perfect opportunity, or so she thought. The Major returned and found her looking for the proof she required to hand him over to the authorities.
If the maid bumped him off, why hasn't she been arrested?
The events that followed in the study are not those of a cold-blooded murder, but one of a young girl that had no other option but to protect her own life.
Sounds to me, Detective, like you have taken a shine to this young girl and would rather protest her innocence than arrest her for murder, the crime she has committed.
Jeez, this is gonna make for a juicy story.
Mademoiselle, I ask you this. You have seen the Major's anger before, oui?
What if I have?
How do you think he would have reacted if someone was to find proof that he had committed a terrible act, and that if made public, would surely result in his incarceration? Exactement.
It is quite the story you have told, Detective, but all I have heard is that Elizabeth overheard a conversation blaming the Major for her fiancé's death, and she murdered him in revenge. A servant killing a man that is as revered as he was. She will face the noose.
I am not denying that a man has lost his life, but it is not the crime of murder that you all believe. While the Major did not deserve to die in such a way, it was his actions towards Mademoiselle Elisabeth that drove her to defend herself in any way she could. Mademoiselle Elisabeth will be punished, but we will let the law decide the severity of her punishment.
She has played you like a fiddle, Detective, acting the innocent victim. She will be arrested and hanged for her crime, like every other cold-blooded killer.
Hear, hear.
Give her what she deserves.
The girl has got to pay for what she's done.
Those of you that are calling for the hanging of Mademoiselle Elisabeth, have you forgotten the roles you played?
Look, Detective, I see where you are going with this, but it's not going to work. So maybe the strikes were down to De Silva and Beckers.
Mademoiselle Conrad, if you are so confident of your innocence, perhaps...
You don't need to imply it's only me that does. Ask any of my journalists, they'll say the same.
Even if in the process people are hurt? You knew the situation surrounding the strikes, and only sought to swell the anger in... Mademoiselle, you so often have something to say. Now is not the time for
You really are delusional.
Maybe you should... Talking of sacrificing love... Look, it's...
Mademoiselle, I do not have time for your excuses. Do you wish to state your direct involvement?
It's not... Okay, fine. Yes, the story was going nowhere. There was a deal on the table, and it was going to be done and dusted. Everything you said is true. I wanted the story. The scoop that would have blown the others out of the water. I didn't think you had this side in you. I can see now why Angeline asked for you personally. You're not like other cops. It's clear...
We can't just forget what that girl has done. It's not Jackie's fault, or any of ours, that she...
Monsieur Beckers, you are the last person I expect... We talked only last night, and correct me if I am wrong, but you have already declared the...
Yes, we talked. It's just not fair of you to attack Jackie like that. Putting word... Detective, I'm afraid you're misunderstood. That is not how it was. It was not my intention for things to escalate as they did. I could not have predicted that would happen. Jackie was documenting everything to do with the strikes. She wanted our story to be heard and wanted to know...
And they were handled by yourself?
Naturally. If I cannot handle simple negotiations... I was only pushing for what my men deserved, what they needed. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, Detective. Surely you must know that. Nothing is ever simple, Detective. I'm sure you understand that better. You're right, Detective. I have tried so hard to deny my part, but I know only too well that I know I cannot excuse what I've done. I just want you all to know that I am not a hateful or malicious man. I only wanted to prove that I was the right man. I have lived in other... Monsieur Da Silva offered me a deal and I turned it down. I thought I was doing right by the workers.
What more proof do you need? He said it himself. I made a generous offer to reach a
It was not that simple, though. An offer was made. But Monsieur Beckers and the workers would never have been forced into that position had their work...
This is outrageous! Do you plan on blame... It may be a big deal to you, but I am used to workers not being happy with something. And most of the time, that when you're in charge of your own factory, you'll understand. I handle the situation. If you think otherwise, maybe you have proved us all right, that you... You said it, anonymous. I don't know them, and it doesn't sound like they know me. When you have something people want...
Monsieur Da Silva, you seem to have forgotten our previous...
I recall them just fine, thank you. A police officer trying to manipulate... Is that what you plan to do? Accuse us all of...
The events that led to the maid...
Apparently anyone can become a detective now.
Through order and...
Order? There's no order in beating down who you consider...
Monsieur da Silva, you have stood steadfast, and you...
Detective, you would do well not to anger my friend.
It was not my intention. I only want those responsible to be held accountable. Does your position on Mademoiselle Elizabeth's guilt remain the same?
Even after all your attempts, Detective, Felix was still murdered. Self-defense or not, she chose to hide.
It was not choice to hide anything, madame. If in her position, I ask, what would you have done? The Major had...
I wouldn't have driven a knife into him, that I can tell you for sure. She is no fool. Quite presumptuous of you to assume violence is in his name.
Putting my own feelings towards the Major aside, he was not an honorable man, at least at some time in his life. So, even you confirm he had a...
You have no idea. He was there.
You were there for him when he needed free room and board.
That is not the case, and you...
His actions are unforgivable and should not be defended.
You judge him so harshly, but I return the... He had made mistakes. I will not deny that.
S'il te plaît, madame. I ask that you consider everything...
He was not always like that. The man that I called a friend would... I cannot allow another innocent person to be punished.
You have seen the Major act in a similar manner as I described before, haven't you? What was the outcome then?
You have convinced me that I am wrong, in both my opinion on Elizabeth's punishment...
Not when a potential crime has been committed, and I fear an innocent party.
He was just a boy. I told him to...
The confrontation with Mademoiselle Elizabeth was not the first time he has come close.
It was following the officer's ball. A young man, no older than 16, stopped us on the street. Like a flash, Felix snapped and wouldn't let go of him.
But he was never charged for the attack.
Felix called the captain at the station and said that the boy was thrown behind bars without a second thought.
And even after witnessing such a brutal assault, you still support him?
The days following, he showed no signs of remorse, no apology to him or to me. I blamed it...
Had you been open about the Major's temper, this could all have been avoided. When you tell the courts the truth...
Just when I thought I could not see...
Excuse me?
You allowed a bully and thug to remain in your house and endanger your...
I'm sorry, Margot, but I am...
I'm surprised you can hear me way up there on that high...
How dare you speak to me in that way?
I can see that. Murderers, thieves, and extortionists are all acceptable, it's...
Countess, I have talked at length of the Major's death. When I last gathered you all together, I spoke of a blackmail ring that was rife in the area. And then Mademoiselle Angeline requested my help personally after she received such a letter threatening her family name.
Get on with it, detective. Who dared try and extort my family, and then...
If it was not for the honesty of a young servant, I would perhaps...
For goodness sake,
Margot.
While it looked as though the Countess was helping the young women at the shelter, she was in fact only finding them positions of employment in wealthy homes to gather information. Monsieur da Silva fell victim to her network of moles and was in turn blackmailed. It was quite the prosperous setup you had.
That cannot be true, Margot.
That is rich. Come.
You are one of my oldest friends.
High and mighty, Madame Van den Bosch. You think you can do what you wish?
If I do not get a straight answer out of you...
I'm surprised it took the Major this long to start living with you. He must have been on the edge for...
How dare you speak to me?
A home you share with the father of your daughter for so many years.
You have no right.
Maman!
Angeline? Have you heard what she has admitted to? She is merely trying to make herself...
Is what she says true? Felix, he was my father? That is the secret that the letter was talking about, isn't it? You told me that we had nothing to hide. Detective Poirot, were you aware of this?
Oui, mademoiselle. But it was not my place to repeat.
I don't understand. What about father?
Your maman betrayed the love of a good, honest man and played away behind his back and then kept it hidden for all these years like a lady of the night with her client list.
You will say no more. Angeline, I...
Did Felix know?
This is not an appropriate conversation.
He knew, dear girl. He knew the whole time. It is only dear Edwin that was blind to their deceit.
You will not talk of him like that. You will not talk of him at all.
If I don't, who will? You never deserved him. You don't even deserve the memory of him.
Comtesse, there is something that you still have not explained.
What more is there for her to say?
How long were you in love with the Viscount for?
Margot? Is that true?
We were destined to be together. And then you turned up. And I was all but forgotten about.
But you were nothing more than friends.
And you made sure of that, didn't you? From the day you arrived, it was all about what you wanted and what you had to do to get it. You didn't consider Edwin at all. He was just a purse to you.
I loved my husband, and I miss him every day.
Loved him enough to stray?
Both of you, no more!
Please, Angeline, let me explain.
Maman, I do not wish to hear anything else from you.
Not even your own daughter wants to hear your lies anymore. Cassandra Van den Bosch, all alone.
How dare you!
While I feel a sense of satisfaction and pride in solving both cases, there is still a part of me that is reluctant to revel in triumph. I am content with the unmasking of Comtesse de Vos as the blackmailer, and knowing that she will pay for her crimes. But it is the justice for Mademoiselle Elizabeth that worries me. She will stand in a court of law, and I can only hope that they can see she acted in self-defense. I must trust that our legal system and justice will prevail, and a fair sentencing will be given. In protecting her own life, she took the life of another. Perhaps the guilt she must live with is a greater punishment than any sentence she can receive. Comtesse de Vos was taken from Nemozinet House in cuffs and placed under arrest. Although she initially tried to plead her innocence, Inga, along with a number of other girls that the Comtesse had found employment for, came forward and made full statements. She was charged with 5 counts of blackmail and extortion and sent to a house of corrections, where she will have a new life to become accustomed to. Monsieur Sterling and Mademoiselle Rihanna were also reprimanded for their participation. While they may not be facing time in prison, tampering with a crime scene and obstruction of a police investigation are certainly not something that houses and new employers will look positively on. Mademoiselle Angeline finally became Madame Demire, and together they took up residence in England, where Monsieur Demire continues to support and fight for fairness and equality in London. I am happy to say that we have remained in contact, and Madame Demire has become a regular correspondent of mine, and the latest joyous news is that they are expecting a child of their own. Madame Van den Bosch showed compassion that I had not seen in her before. She stood in court and gave a truthful and genuine character reference of Elizabeth, as well as describing the Major and the atrocious crimes he had committed. After Madame Van den Bosch's secret was revealed to the world, her position in the social hierarchy was no more, disappearing in a moment. While she still resides in Belgium, I believe she has had to adapt to a far more modest way of life. A humbling experience for her, I am sure. Following her actions in the courtroom, Angeline believed that her maman still had a place in her life. Although they are on different sides of La Manche, they remain in contact. Mademoiselle Conrad left Nemozinet House the same way she entered, confident in herself and audacious in her opinions. Her report of the Major's murder at the house and the surrounding blackmails became one of the most talked about stories of the year. While there were certain details of her own involvement that did not make it to print, she was really quite complimentary about the detective at the heart of the case. Monsieur de Silva tried to continue in his position as factory owner and business entrepreneur, but after his accounts and business dealings were investigated following the details of his blackmail being made public in Mademoiselle Conrad's article, his illustrious business empire began to crumble and is now facing an international corporate investigation. Monsieur Beckers stepped down from his position as union leader, accepting that he was no longer fit to represent the workforce that, in his words, he had let down on a scale of unmeasurable proportion. Although he is no longer the voice of the workers, he continues to support them from behind the scenes. Monsieur Zachariah and his brother made amends, and returning to his family home, and after sobering up, he was able to find the help that he required. I understand that he is now helping fellow soldiers with similar conditions. And Mademoiselle Elizabeth, she stood before a court, and while the proceedings were deemed controversial, the charges against her were dropped, and the reasoning of self-defense was accepted by the presiding judge. Madame Van den Bosch's testimony, along with Mademoiselle Angeline's declaration of her good character, was enough to show that it was not in Elizabeth's nature to act in such a violent way. The abundance of evidence against the Major, and his violent and cruel nature, including his appalling acts during the strikes and the war, was more than enough to prove that Mademoiselle Elizabeth had no other option in that situation but to defend herself in any way that she could. With the new arrival of Madame and Monsieur Demire's child next year, they have agreed to give Elizabeth the opportunity to return home to England and take up a position in their home as nanny. The death of Elizabeth's beloved Luc has been at the center of everything. Had those in positions to help not acted with only themselves in mind, perhaps he would still be alive today, and the Major would have paid the price for his own crimes in the eyes of the law, not at the blade of a knife. The blood of Major Felix Egan will remain on Elizabeth's hands, a stain that wherever she is and whatever she may do, she will never be able to wash clean. However, it will remain as a reminder to not only her, but all of us, of what we as human beings are capable of to protect ourselves. We all have something that may be considered shameful or sinful, and it is how we deal with it that shows our true character. Those involved in the riots, the workers' deaths, and the Major's killing believed themselves to be untouchable. Whether it was from their social standing or their confidence in themselves, they learned that everyone is accountable for their actions. There is no exemption because of the suit you wear or the money in your bank account. There is no price to a man's life. It cannot be bought or traded or discarded. No man is better than another, including Detective Hercule Poirot.